So we are sort of a little over halfway in the project, and I'm really excited about where we are. I couldn't help bragging on LinkedIn and posted about what we're doing yesterday. And we're in the process of taking stock of where we are. Spencer will also talk a little bit more to that in a minute, to get an overview and to see where we need to adjust and what we've learned and so forth for the remaining months of work. So there's about a month left of sort of basic research, and then there's sort of the processing and the reviewing, which we will begin. And we'll mark that also by, I mean, we've had a number of really interesting speakers, I think. I hope you agree, until now on the future of finance and what the outlooks are for banking and insurance and so forth. And we'll look a little bit more on the political side going forward, and a little bit more on the impacts. And we'll launch that today with the Danish tech ambassador Anne-Marie Engtoft Larsen, who will talk to us about sort of the policy side and how a government has reacted to the emergence and growth of big tech and technology in general, and the issues that has raised. So it's a really good opportunity to discuss, of course, societal impacts and how big tech and the use of data and AI may impact societies and so forth. So please make really good use of that. And then we today wanted to, as said, take stock a little bit, status on where we are. Spencer has spent some time on managing our Miro overview, and we can share sort of a general overview of where we are. And then I'll just say a few words about our intentions for we've talked a bit about that, sort of the gaming platform, and our plans to make a tool that will help industry organizations and others better understand the ethical challenges of using technology in the financial sector, and provide a framework for discussing that. So we'll give a bit more word to that, and also hope for your input on that. And then we'll mention our idea of supporting ideation across teams by organizing a few workshops in the coming weeks based on sort of ideation and using Miro as a platform to support your ideation and especially do it across teams. So try to make sure a little bit differently for that. And then I look forward to hearing updates from you, where you are on your work, before we talk to Anne-Marie in just about 45 minutes from now. I don't know if there are any comments before we start. It's really good to see you all, and I know this is a really busy time of year for most of you, with the exams and papers coming and last minute preparations before hopefully summer vacation and all, and I hope you're all good through the pandemic as well. I know it's certainly not over. So any comments? Please just use the chat or check in. Good. So as said, we will have an increased focus on impact. So you might say that, I mean, we are providing the basic input for research. We're doing research, and the input that we are providing is, of course, also providing input for policy and discussions about policy and how to relate to the challenges of technology. So just very briefly, we will over the coming month look at sort of a few of the topics we haven't touched, blockchain and platform and a few additional technologies. And then we'll look at the impact area and the impact side, climate bias, human rights. And then we'll talk to the consumer side. We have the Gate Foundation speaking to us. We have Tencent and Ping An, Lagos Business School, and we have Safari. And a few additional speakers who will help talk to those topics. So expect that we sort of shift a little bit more over to sort of the impact side. Hopefully also supporting the work that you are doing in teams. We still have time to take in sort of suggestions. So if any of you have ideas or areas that you could see would be really useful for you in your research, please say so, and we can reach out. And then we'll look more and more gradually, look more and more sort of concretely on the work you have, and we'll slowly start preparing review sessions to review across the teams and start looking at that. And so in order, and I'll just share screen here. In order to do that, you can see my screen, right? In order to do that, we are looking at or we will be using Miro, and we'll use Miro more and more. So if anyone have issues with Miro, or anyone can't access or whatever, please say so, and we'll see how we can support and help on that. But Spencer has spent some time the past week collecting and processing some of the templates up there, and this is a snapshot. So anyone from payment and insurance, I mean, this is an overview. We know that there are things happening, but when you sort of make a snapshot of the dilemmas that we have looking at, this is sort of what it looks at the moment. But Spencer, can you give us just a few words about the work that you did here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize if my connection is a little rough too. I'll try my best. But so here's the link to the Miro board right now. Let me know if anyone is having a hard time connecting to it. You can either let me know in the chat or email me. But yeah, so what I did is I went into everyone's drives and pulled out information from spreadsheets, and then I put them into the dilemma template. So all the dilemma templates, if you want access to them, they should be in your drive. But you can also download them on the PDF on this Miro board as well. So yeah, the purpose of this is to see where we're currently at right now. I think we're about 43 dilemmas strong. So just about where we should be at halfway through the project. But yeah, it's also an excellent way to see how our ideation process and this is going, and what further collaboration we can do, because now is the time as well to start digging our roots a little bit deeper into the dilemmas that we currently have. So you can see if anyone is working on a topic that relates to yours, or if there's a topic that your dilemma affects but you might not know about. You can see if someone is working on something about that topic, and it also allows us to see what subjects and dilemmas we might be a little bit short on. Right now, we have a lot of dilemmas on privacy, which is great, but I think we're a little bit short on future privacy dilemmas, such as like what future data metrics may be concerning for companies to use. So maybe we can start looking into that a little bit more. I don't know if that might fall in customer engagement or a little bit in all realms, all teams. So that's something we can start looking towards as well. Yeah, because a large part about ethics is not just about what is going on right now, but it's also about spotting dilemmas in the future as well. But yeah, I think that's about it. Email me, please, if you're having access or having a hard time accessing this board. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, please let me know.
Does anyone have comments or reactions to the overview? So we'll be yes, it does look organized, and it really is great. I mean, we are really excited about the state that, or the status of the project. It looks really good. And we'll start discussing these dilemmas that we have across, and support work on those that we have. So please use. Please use the drive and the shared folders we have, so that we can pick up on these, and please look at the Miro board. And again, if you have any issues accessing Miro, or any issues working with it, please let us know, so we can help. We are probably also, or we're not probably, we are also at the state where if you need access to people to interview on the dilemmas you're working on, access to people to discuss some of those dilemmas with, this is the time to do it, because in quite a few places they'll be sort of slowly over the coming month closing down for summer, and becoming more and more difficult to access. So ideas you have for people to talk to, and really just be ambitious here. Don't hesitate. Don't worry. And in that regard, we are really sort of ready and happy to help in reaching out to potential people to talk to in order to do this. I mean, we are sort of over halfway, and that also means that sort of the people you may want to talk to, it's about time to do that. And we'll be using this overview also in the sessions we have. So I mean, this is a screen dump from that you're looking at here. This is a screen dump from Miro, and we'll just update that and look at it more in depth over the coming weeks. So I see no questions or comments. What we will use it for, just to give it a few more, or just a bit more words on the context there, so we're all on the same page. I think that would be useful. I mean, we're doing the research side, and we're doing the papers that we look forward to seeing, and all that, blog posts and so forth. And Spencer will also support sort of on the project side some of that communication, and start doing some blog posts and some podcasts and so forth in the coming weeks on that. And that'll also be input to the gaming solution, or the conversation platform that we've talked about. So the library of dilemmas, or this compound of challenges that we have identified, we intend to use as an input for a game that a company can use. Most organizations are realizing that there are, hopefully, fortunately, realizing that there are challenges related to the use of technology in their business. But for most organizations, that's our experience. It's quite difficult to sort of relate to that discussion about the ethics of that, and the impact of that. And the intention is that the work we do can be helpful in that regard. So we plan to make an analog conversation tool and an online or digital conversation tool. And so imagine as the analog conversation platform, sort of a concept for a workshop that a company can do. It could be a board, or a team, or a part of the organization, or the entire organization. Where we will use the content that we are developing here. So that's the entire sort of the entire set of dilemmas that we have made as content, so that in a game the participants, or in such a conversation platform, the participants will be met with these dilemmas and be presented with these dilemmas, and then we'll provide a framework for discussing those. And that could be that. This is sort of a discussion loop I made for a presentation to develop for dialogue with banks last year, and the idea is simply to provide a framework for having sort of a structured approach to some of these challenges, and that could contain sort of these steps. An understanding of the problem, of the stakeholders, and of the values that are in play in relation to the dilemma, and then looking at different domains of ethics, and that could be duty ethics or consequential ethics and virtue ethics, and looking at sort of the traditional line of questions from those areas to support an understanding and analysis of the problem that you're looking at, and use that as input for an analysis and a decision on the values of the company and the values that you find relevant in order to make a decision on an ethical challenge. And that could be part of a sort of a workshop approach that a team could use to train its ethical muscle, to train its ability to understand and work with the ethical dilemmas. And the upside or the value of this would be that it makes it concrete. I think it's often quite difficult for industry organizations to discuss these ethical challenges. It tends to become a little bit fluffy or difficult to relate to, and by presenting our dilemmas, we can make it concrete and provide a frame for that. We'll use the same approach for an online game, and the idea for an online game could be in a virtual reality setting or in an online setting. Provide a game or a gaming platform, again, that an organization can use. A team, a company, could be a board, or it could be a group of people within the organization, or it could be individuals in the organization that need to better understand the nature of these ethical challenges and how to relate to them. So again, the templates that you are making could be the content for that. That could be I mean, if you imagine a persona or as part of such an online game, you could be met with the different ethical dilemmas, the ones that you have made here, and we could provide a framework again through a game for approaching these, for discussing these. And as part of such a framework, we could add in input on ethical thinking, on different schools of ethics, on different values, and on different sort of technical aspects of all of that. That could be done through some of the podcasts we're doing, some of the interviews, and by accessing some of the people that we've talked to through our project, so that we are providing an online platform that a company can use to have that discussion, which is more and more necessary for more and more organizations in providing a better understanding and in promoting a culture of responsible or mindfulness in dealing with these technical issues. And that's what we'll start, or we have started working on, but that's what we will sort of process as we process also the dilemmas and the work that we are doing. So just providing a little bit more insight to or content to the ideas that we've mentioned. I hope it makes it a little bit clearer the sort of the context that we also plan to or hope to use the dilemmas that we are developing in. I don't know if that gives questions or raises questions for anyone. Really happy to discuss this. Also, any thoughts on the? So we made a better version of sort of a model for making ethical decisions or making ethically related decisions. You have it in the PowerPoint we shared. Really happy for any discussions or any input on that, and any input or thoughts on how we can promote such a game setting. But that could actually be a really concrete and a really relevant input. It is my experience that and that's, I think, quite obvious that more and more organizations that are using AI, that are using data, need to promote the sort of general culture and the general understanding within organizations about what these challenges are, what these issues are. And I think this is a very concrete and relevant way of promoting that, because it would simply enable companies to have, or organizations to have such a discussion. That's another reason why the templates you're developing are so important. Comment or reach out also after the meeting, and let's discuss how we can promote that. Good. We'll provide more input on that idea and start sketching on it. We'll set up that, and we will also look at sort of various digital platforms to use to this end, and develop that context. So, but the templates, the framework, and then all the sort of knowledge input we have around that in a vivid and dynamic form. So short talks and interviews and content to be added to such a platform would be the final product. Good. I'm just looking to see if anyone has any questions. So just to mention, before we hear input from you, as said, we are preparing a few workshops across teams, and we've mentioned this a few times, so I just again wanted to be a little bit more concrete. Over the coming weeks, we will invite you to 2 workshops of ideation. And the idea is that we mix teams a little bit. So you've been working or you are working in the main tracks of insurance and lending and climate and so forth, and you'll continue to do that. But we can just see that really many issues have touchdowns across or horizontally across the teams. So there's a lot of shared stuff between insurance and climate, and insurance and lending, or payment and credit, and payment and climate and so forth. And we think it would be useful for all of us to just shake the tree a little bit and get the last ideas out, and promote that sort of final round of ideation, and then especially look at those sort of cross-track issues, and to see what happens if we sort of mix insurance and climate, and insurance and credit and so forth. So we'll do 2 ideation workshops. We'll use Miro as a platform again, and then we'll sort of use design thinking methodologies in promoting ideation, and hopefully we'll mix you, or we'll be able to mix and blend you well across the teams. We are looking at 2 days in the week starting June 28th. and we would do 2 sessions of 2 hours. And we'll provide you with an opportunity to sign up this week, and ask you to sign up for either of the 2 dates we will be presented with. It would most likely be the 30th and the 30th of June, the 1st of July, so Wednesday and Thursday in that week, I think. And so please sign up for both or either as possible for you of those sessions, and then we'll try to already this week share with you which date that you will actually join, and we'll provide you more information in the beginning of next week about how we intend to do this to these workshops. The hope is that we'll get a few more last minute ideas when we combine the thinking from different tracks, and when we see how sort of some of the thoughts that you have that have been focused on your track actually relate to thinking in other areas and some of the other tracks. And generally more and more we'll start to also, as we sort of enter into a phase where we'll be reviewing and expanding on the dilemmas that you have identified, we'll start to work sort of more and more out of the tracks and look across the general area. So any questions to that or comments to that? I hope it's still useful for you or possible for you in those dates in that week, and that we just manage it before too many are off on work or vacation or other. I don't see comments in the chat, so I hope you're agreeing. Good. I'll share the updated presentation in mail and send out that, and then expect that we reach out end of this week or over the weekend, Monday, with those dates to sign up for the workshops, and then expect more information about how we'll actually do those workshops, or those ideation workshops in the coming weeks as we prepare for that. Okay. If no comments, then we have just about 20 minutes before we'll be joined by Anne-Marie, the Danish tech ambassador, and have a discussion with her about societal impact and how governments and society can react to some of the challenges of technology. Let's hear from you. Let's hear just a brief status or question or comments from the teams on your work. Who is ready to give us just a brief 4 to 5 minutes sort of overview of your work? Any sort of ideas you have that are relevant across? I saw one very relevant idea coming out of the customer management team on using keywords and tagging some of the dilemmas, which will of course be super useful for our work, and we'll implement that in the work going forward. So any comment on your status or on your work, or on issues and challenges that you are seeing. Who's ready to give us just a brief status on their work? Who's ready to share? And I see a forest of hands here. No pressure. Just a very brief 4 or 5 minutes expose of where you are.
So I would take the honor of going first if no one
Great.
is to. So I am representing the credit and lending team, and usually we have the inspiration session before our team meeting. So we have team meeting on Friday and inspiration session on Thursday. So normally we update everyone on Friday, but still I would like to walk you through what so far we have accomplished. So as you saw in the mirror board, we have been able to identify a couple of um, I think it was around 11 dilemmas that we have been able to identify. And we are still working on that. And other than that, we have been able to edit our research plan, and which we will discuss in detail with Ellis tomorrow in our team meeting. And some of the outcome that we have focused on while we will be working on finding the dilemmas will be so first it will be on data bias and data gap. What are the structural disadvantages that are being built in historical data, and therefore will create a bias algorithm. So use of accelerated biases by algorithm to identify existing biases. That will be one outcome. The second will be with sensitive data is allowed to be used, how to deal with confounding factors like race, gender, sexual orientation, religion that can be tracked by online behavior, and such as like new metrics that can give access to loan for which standards, or moving into a different country, what affects or how it affects the credit system or credit score. All right. And the third one is how we will also be looking at the unsupervised machine learning, which is the black box problem, and understand the relevant input, inform consumers what is impacting their score and how to improve it. So these are three main outcomes that we have thought as a group, which, as I said, we will discuss in detail and definitely edit it further in tomorrow group meeting. Um, Other than that, we stumbled upon this report by Alan Turing Institute that was published on 14th of June. 14th of June. That is AI in financial services, and it has a lot of new information that we would like to work on, especially when it comes to the supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. And one of them, because I remember in our first inspiration session, there was this. Mm, I'm forgetting the term, which was supervised learning, which was discussed in detail. That was I'm still not able to remember, but yeah, we are looking at the machine learning approaches as well, and facial recognition system. And one of the case study that we stumbled upon while doing our research was in the black box problem. It was actually a 2018 study conducted at University of California, Berkeley, and found that traditional face-to-face decision and those made by machine learning system charged Latin American and African American borrowers interest rate that were 6 to 9 basis point higher in the States. So I thought this would be a really good case study to dig deeper into. And yeah, so far we are standing like, yeah, we have like 11 dilemmas. We have been able to somehow formulate our outcomes, like three major outcomes that we want to deliver. And we are looking at another industry report, which is like an academic report by Alan Turing, which we will further discuss in tomorrow's meeting within our team. And yeah, so that's the update so far.
Thank you very much. That's really really interesting. And so I have to admit I actually hadn't seen the Turing Institute publication that came out in June. So really happy you point to it. We'll try and reach out. I don't know if we can make it, but we'll try and reach out to the Turing Institute and see if we can talk to them about the report.
That would be really amazing, actually. Because I mean, looking at the executive summary, we have been, especially in the machine learning approaches,
Yeah.
we have been able to identify one or two dilemmas that could be really helpful for from credit and lending point of view. And we would be definitely, I mean, I'm not sure at this point I can confirm that, but going forward, we would be really happy to have a small chat with them and like dig deeper into what the rationale behind that was.
Yeah. But we'll definitely try that. They are in general a really good source in this area and have a tremendous amount of interesting research. We have a very good collaboration also with Berkeley, and if you need, we can try and be helpful in that just to see how that might support your work there. And again, just think ambitiously and broadly about relevant people to talk to support, and how we may be helpful in general in going through the dilemmas. We'll take stock and get an overview as set of the content that we have, and we'll begin to reach out more and more to you to discuss the actual content and make sure that we actually also understand what you are working on and developing. Thank you really very much, Siddharth. That was great. So who wants to follow? No pressure.
Yes, the
sorry.
team.
Great, Mike. Yeah.
Follow. And I see Felix is here as well, who also said might be available. So I propose that I will start with like a general my perception, and then Felix can maybe follow up with some of his points as well, if that's fine. Okay, so just like Siddharth said about his team, we've also made substantial progress. I think we are in a generally comfortable position. We're having completed the dilemma templates for for exactly 8 dilemmas, which we think is a good number. I think we still think that we can expand on it a little bit more in the next week, but 8 dilemmas are still definitely something to work on, and where the point where the project is for us right now is that we want to just add maybe 2-4 dilemmas, but then move on to the next phase of the research, which is going more into the specific types or more into the specifics of the individual dilemmas and researching them more into depth and in detail. And that is maybe on that point, it's maybe a good time to follow up to what you mentioned, Soren, that there might be some sessions going on in the coming weeks across the work streams, across the teams. I think it would be really useful for us, because since our work stream is, on the impacts of climate change, or the impacts of banking into climate change, so that's a very broad topic. So I think it's very little surprise that we've identified many things that actually do impact some of these other work streams. Just from the last meeting, what comes to mind, that we talked a lot about insurance. So and one of the other overreaching topics that we keep coming back to is the division of global north versus the global south, and how that should be reflected in our research and in the industrial practices in banking. So and we were talking about, for example, how insurance and climate impacted areas should be adapted to the local environments, both business economics wise and social wise. We also were wondering, when we're talking about the banking's the climate change impact of banking, if that should be measured in the same way in developed economies and the less developed economies, and how do we create a methodology, or if we are to create a methodology, what do we keep in mind to make this methodology equitable globally, and not just making comparable between Western European and other developed countries. So that's something. And we also were talking about the data itself. So for example, in insurance, as you've mentioned, Soren, there are some ethical considerations about what type of data is used to evaluate someone's score. But on the other hand, we also were talking about what based on the type of data that is used, you know, sometimes it's kept secret, or mostly it's supposed to be kept secret, but people try to find out, you know, from the bankers or something. There are some leaks, and then when we know about the data that is being used, it can seem coercive, basically influencing people to behave in a certain way, which is also an ethical consideration that we are exploring. Yeah, Felix, would you like to add a little bit, a couple of words?
Yeah, I think you gave a really nice overview of where we are. I mean, it's essentially we are looking at, I think if you look at our dilemmas, most of them cover the area of reporting itself and standards, and also then standards between North and South. And indeed, I would say machine learning is like the essential technology that we are looking at. From what I believe is missing, and what we also would need to take a look at in the future, is I think the topic of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and their environmental performance is probably a topic that is so hot right now, and yeah, apparent for everyone, that we probably cannot leave it out. And I think there we should think internally within our team, because it's clearly allocated to our team, who takes that, or whether we have a subgroup interested in looking at that, because we haven't really yet. And also I thought about just funding, VC funding of tech companies in the developing world that want to tackle the issue of climate change, or the disparity between VC funding there and VC funding in Europe, even though the topic basically is relevant for both regions and simultaneously, is still also a dilemma I think we could look into. But I think those will be discussed then further internally within our group.
Agreed. And just to briefly add to Felix, we have been discussing cryptocurrency quite a lot, and funnily enough, I shared with my team, and now I shared it in the chat with everyone of you that is on Zoom right now. Funnily enough, at my my research lab in Cambridge, we developed, or I wasn't part of the team directly, but they developed a very useful tool estimating actually the day-to-day consumption of energy by Bitcoin. So you can take a look at, you know, just how gargantuan the numbers are.
That's really an interesting discussion. Comments from any of the other teams on this? Does it raise comments from other teams? Access to capital being impacted by climate, or insurance, as we mentioned, being impacted. We'll provide and we'll help you sort of gain that access to that across. But I think this is thank you very much, Marek and Felix, for that overview. There are quite a few things we'll follow up on. We'll follow up also on the Bitcoin issue across with additional speakers to that very hot topic. Yes. And thanks for sharing the tracker, Marek. It's really interesting to follow and monitor that and how Bitcoin impacts the daily value of Tesla and or the Tesla stock. Quite a few interesting connections there. Any comments from anyone on the work of the climate session?
I necessarily don't have any comment, but I mean, I would personally get in touch with you, Mark, to understand if there's a connection with credit and lending and our climate change or climate team. So I because I haven't found a single paper we're referencing, but it would be quite interesting to understand if there is, or going further, if there will be any connection with, like, because people there might be a mass migration due to climate change, okay, and people moving from one continent to the other country, and then you also have a credit scoring differences also when you move to a new country. So just because it's not properly related, but somehow due to climate change, there will be a movement of people from one place to the other. And then if you want to have um, credit system in a new country or like a new credit score, how will it impact? Or so I would want to understand it more better personally. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be great, and I think it would be perfect, perhaps if you could join our next session so that we can discuss it in more people. But I'm happy to discuss it one-on-one as well. So feel free to reach out.
I think some of the reports and papers that you have in the climate team there would definitely be relevant to share also across. I mean, the Bank of France made a general paper a few years ago, and there are other quite a few general papers that impact exactly what you're talking about, Siddharth. And very relevant discussion about how access to capital is impacted by climate changes. Eskil?
Yeah, sorry. I guess it's not really a question for Marek or the other guys. I think it was really great presentation and very interesting, very interested in cryptocurrency as well. But I guess I just have a question on whether or not it's really related to AI. I guess like a broader question is some of the things that I've seen in both the R dilemmas and the customer engagement group and also more broadly is that as much as interesting as it is, and as much as new technologies as it is, it's not really AI, some of the dilemmas that we're pushing forward. So my question is basically, do we include these kind of new technologies such as Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and focus more on like this novel digitalization of society rather than just AI, or do we focus solely on AI? Yeah, I guess that's just a question for the future.
Very important, really good question. Thanks for asking that, Eskil. Actually, a really important question. So our intention is to look very broadly across the sector and look very broadly at technologies. Obviously, AI is the main tool, or machine learning are the main tools that are impacting the financial sector at the moment. But there are so many other technologies that are actually relevant to look at. So the extent to which you have bandwidth to do that also, we urge you to look very broadly also at other technologies. And again, we are really happy to support that because we can sort of access people who can help, or we can try to access people who can help provide input on some of those. Biometrics, crypto you mentioned, there are quite a lot of areas that are relevant for the financial sector in different areas of that. So definitely not just AI or machine learning, but very broadly in your work. Really important question. Thanks for raising that, Eskil. I don't know if that gives. So we have just a minute or two until Anne-Marie will join us. So we'll hold the other teams until later or until after. We talked to Anne-Marie. That will be just about an hour. She'll have to leave. Welcome Paul. Welcome Alessandro. I don't know if there are other comments across following up from Marek and Felix's presentation of the work there.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I believe that I'm from the insurance team, and I believe that it's really important, the work of climate change and the intersection with insurance. I really would like to have a meeting with you guys, with the whole teams together. But right now we are on the move. We are on the progress, and I believe that is important for us to understand the insurance sector a little bit more before we have this meeting. So I'm thinking about like end of the month or beginning of July, something like that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinicius. Definitely relevant, and we'll look at that time plan as well. Generally, we'll look more and more on the time plan and see where we are on that, and how we can support that as we are sort of more than halfway through. And as I said also. We will invite you to, some of you may have joined, we'll invite you to those sort of cross-team ideation workshops that we'll do in the week starting 28 June. So we'll do 2 sessions of each about 2 hours, and we'll mix and blend you so that we make sure that we have people from different tracks and teams in those ideation sessions. And we'll do that exactly to sort of cross-pollinate and make sure that we make some of those connections, or try to make some of those connections that you are exactly discussing now between credit and climate and so forth. Please also let us know, sort of again, if you have questions and how we can be helpful in making those connections. And please make use of the drive. And I hope you can all access our shared folders on Drive, and that you can actually also access the work of the other teams and other tracks. And if you cannot, please let us know, because then let's look at settings and see how because you should be able to follow both the lists of readings you may have stored, the relevant documents, what have you, but also the actual work that you're doing. Yes, Alice, I'll send the Drive link, or we'll send out the links to make sure, and we'll use both mail and chat to make sure that you have access to that. That's really important at this stage, of course. Really good questions. So we are waiting for Anne-Marie. I can't see she's joined yet, but she'll join us in just a minute or so, and then we'll follow up after Anne-Marie's talk with status on the other teams. And so just to fill the gap while we're waiting for Anne-Marie to join. So it's still a fairly new office. Anne-Marie is the second tech ambassador that Denmark has, and an example of how societies realize how tech and technology is impacting different areas of life and society and democracy in general. So Denmark generally boasts that this was the first instance of such a tech ambassador, but more and more countries have done the same, either as an ambassador, so a person anchored in that part of government or foreign service, and the idea there was that such a person can reach out to technology and use that whole setup around that to engage tech, and some of tech now being larger than or at least an economy larger than many countries, and certainly with an impact beyond what many countries have. Providing an opportunity to engage that, and more places or in more countries, similar roles have been set up, of course, and it's becoming a global issue of discussion. Yeah. And I'm just looking across to see if Anne-Marie has joined. Just rest your ears a minute, and Anne-Marie will join us any minute. Yes. Welcome. Welcome, Anne-Marie. We're really, really happy to see you. Can you hear
so
me?
much. I can hear you perfectly. Hi,
Good.
Søren. Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Great, really, really great to see you. We've sent your bio to all, and I've just sort of briefly started talking about your office as Denmark's tech ambassador. But since you've joined, I will, and we're really, really happy for that. You know our project and the work that we are doing in looking at the impacts and challenges that tech also raises, especially in the financial sector. But we're looking across, and we are working on issues relating to climate, insurance, credit, and lending. So really sort of compelling issues in societies, and I trust this is relevant also for your work. We really because we're doing a shift and now in our work looking more and more at societal impact and how to relate to these issues. So we are extremely excited about meeting you and learning more about your work and your insights into this. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And my Danish sense of being on time always get a little challenged when I have to deal with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs firewalls and servers being located thousands of miles away. But nevertheless, it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I've prepared about 20 minutes, talking a little bit about why technological diplomacy. What are we doing? How are we doing it? Getting into some of the dilemmas that I know you've been working with, but I'm really looking forward to the discussion afterwards. I know it's set up as a Q&A, but I really want to hear your perspectives, your thoughts, as you're also leaders in the space. So I hope you can all see my screen, and from here I'll just take a little bit through. So tech diplomacy, it's a short word for technological diplomacy. In Denmark, we started this back in 2017. Denmark was actually the first country in the world to elevate technology digitalization to a cross-cutting foreign and security policy issue. And while it might be new to diplomats dealing with this, one thing that's not new to diplomats is dealing with change and transformation. Ever since the Wiener Convention, and actually last year in December, the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we celebrated our 250-year anniversary. So a long-standing historical diplomatic mission. And for the past 250 years, diplomats have been out there where transformation is taking place, where big changes that are impacting a small country like Denmark in the Nordics. And so that is actually what we're still doing here. But this time, it's not individual countries that is having a huge impact on our society and our markets, on the way we live our lives. It's not big international organizations like it's been for the past 60 years with the International Monetary Fund, the UN, the World Bank. But this time, it's a new group of actors. It's technology companies. Many of them are located here where I am in Silicon Valley, but also across India, across China, across Europe. So starting to engage with a new group of actors in this space is incredibly important, because today we see how some technology companies have far more influence in what are the opportunities for Danish businesses, what are the opportunities for Danish citizens than we see individual countries have. And a big part of the landscape that we are operating in now is in a new geopolitical challenge. Obviously, this is a looking at the geopolitical landscape over the past 5 years. It's been incredibly complex. It is not one that looks like something we've been dealing with in the 20th century. It is first and foremost an increased rivalry between East and West, but not in a traditional sense. For a long time, we've been looking at that in terms of market access. We've been looking at it from a nuclear point of view, but this time it's something that is far more intangible. It's investments into artificial intelligence, to quantum computing, supercomputing, biotechnologies. And where does that leave us, the rest of the world? And in between these two fists, you see a tiny Europe. Where does that leave us as Europeans? But also, where does that leave the rest of the world? As we're seeing this increasing both opportunity, but I think geopolitically also rising tensions. And simply looking at, so where is technological advancement taking place? Right now, it's quite bifurcated. It is predominantly between North America, and to be frank, very much here on the West Coast of the US, and then it's in China. And for a long time, that's been really leading, not just the cutting edge, but so many of the products and services that we use in our everyday life. And that is challenging both from I think a domestic and national security point of view. The question is not only it's about fun entertainment anymore, but these digital technologies are becoming the very backbone of our society. When we talk about critical digital infrastructure, it's no longer just some of the servers where some of our public services are running, but for a country like Denmark, it's almost all of our government. It's our national health institutes. It's our electricity, utilities. So much is being digitized. And with that technology, when we look at the supply chain, when we look at some of the vulnerabilities in those systems, when we look at this geopolitical bifurcation, it becomes incredibly political and not just a matter of how to produce semiconductors and microchips. And then obviously there is increased on some areas, you can see very increased and condensed monopolization on some of these markets. We're seeing, whether it's the GAF or the FANG or whatever we call them, there is a group between 5 to 10, up to 20, regardless of how you sort of look at it, that are becoming incredibly influential. And not only in search engines or in social media, but they are also expanding into other, quite exciting areas. And that's from self-driving vehicles, that's into the healthcare sector, biotechnologies, into actually some of that critical infrastructure I was mentioning before. And that requires us as a country, and me as a diplomat, to engage with these companies, because we believe that the balance between democratically elected governments, parliaments, the citizens they represent, and the large tech companies, it's been skewed in the wrong way. It's been in the favor of the large tech companies that for too long have been able to set the rules a little bit themselves. And now we're seeing governments catching up and really saying, we need to set the scene, we need to set the direction. So in this landscape, this is also why Denmark, as a democratic country, very focused on ensuring the empowerment of citizens and how we develop our future, is taking, I think, quite a strong aim, but insisting that this is not about naming and shaming. This is about an appreciation of the amazing things that technologies can do, but saying, the right thing to do, and that's how we've been doing with any other industry, is that we make citizens the ones to decide what are the fundamental rules of the game. What are some of the guardrails? How do we ensure that these live up to the values that we hold dear in our society? And looking at the past 18 months, and one of the reasons I'm with you here on a screen, rather than being with you physically at a classroom at wonderful Stanford, is obviously because we've been in a pandemic that's been highly accelerating how we're using digital technologies. I don't know about you, but with me, it is with me from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. It is a defining characteristic of my work life, of my social life, of my life as a consumer, as a citizen, how I process information, news, media. So much of this has become increasingly online. And as we are emerging, at least here in California, where I live, and luckily also some other places around the world, as we're emerging from the pandemic, how do we take the best of that accelerated digitization we've all been through and say, how do we make sure that by going forward, we take those lessons learned and we make sure that the positive things we get out of it, we want to continue and incentivize. And some of the negative aspects, the fact that we've been in a pandemic and the disinformation regarding anti-vaccine has never been bigger, that there has never been more, even the fact that we see malicious actors taking advantage of something so critical as a pandemic for spreading mis and disinformation. How to make sure that we have a better defense against that we work together with platforms. So all of these things, I think, are some of the critical questions that we as a government, but also in that engagement with industry, are asking ourselves right now. And I know that this course and what have you been talking a lot about is about some of these dilemmas. And I think as we emerge from COVID and as we think about this rapid digitization of our lives, there's going to be a number of dilemmas. One big one, and one that I think both we as governments, as citizens, as individuals, as companies have to rattle with, is this one that sometimes privacy and security go hand in hand, but sometimes they can also be each other's opposite. As a strong believer in the privacy rights of individuals and ensuring that, I think with the data protection from the EU, the GDPR, and how we've been seeing that being copied around the world as a blueprint for how to secure individual users' privacy, as I said before, we're also seeing a threat landscape on cyberspace that is ever evolving, where we see malicious actors becoming more sophisticated, and where this balance between the individual user's privacy on the one side and our need as a society to work on the security side, so having access at times to devices, making sure our intelligence services have access to the right data, the question around end-to-end encryption, how to make sure that the privacy side is benefiting individual citizens, so it's like you and me, and not criminals, and not those who want to take advantage of the internet. How do we make sure when we design new security and privacy laws that we find a balance in between how to do that? And I think in this dilemma, you could even say one that's privacy versus security versus market opportunities. Some of the questions when we talk about what are the values we hold dear, what is important, and some of you might have been following the discussions around 5G, critical infrastructure. There are also questions around how to make sure that we reap the benefits of those amazing new technologies that are made globally, but that sometimes comes with a potential vulnerability and security. How do we balance that? How do we make sure about this? Some of the privacy concerns, we're starting to see that in the platforms and in the tech companies. The recent iOS update from Apple was a really good point in case. I think a lot of consumers were quite happy with that update, allowing us to do more with ensuring our privacy. And on the other side, you have millions of views, millions of new users on platforms such as TikTok every day, where there are other privacy guidelines, and I think where there are some increasing concerns. So how do we balance that, and how do we as individuals navigate in that, and how do we make the right decisions about what might be hypothetically correct, but in a practical world sometimes is hard to apply. And some of these questions, they're not just about the technical design, they're really kind of core to our security, our social cohesion, our democracies. And looking globally, and not to point for those of you who are here on Pacific time with me, it's early in the morning for painting a grim picture. But nevertheless, I think when we look at the global share of democracies, it's been declining. For the first time in my lifetime, we're seeing that what I grew up with, this fundamental belief that democracies were stable. We would see more democracies, not less. And right now, we are seeing, even in some of the most traditional democracies, we are seeing people questioning democracy. We're seeing the share of world population living in autocratic countries is on the rise. And that begs the question, in an increasingly digitized world, how to make sure that technology ultimately supports democracies, those values that we hold quite dear. And that goes in again to some of the dilemmas around from how we're developing technologies to how we're disseminating them to how we're governing them. So back to how is Denmark trying to operate and navigate in this? Well, first of all, we recognize that technology is a global issue. So I have the pleasure of working with wonderful colleagues here in Silicon Valley, in Copenhagen, and in Beijing. But moreover, we have a network of over 20 embassies across the world, Danish embassies, where they are also working with this question around technology. How does it impact national legislation, geopolitical tensions, regional affairs, market opportunities, investment, trade opportunities, all of this. So really trying to get a global comprehensive understanding of this. And how we're the way our work is guided is through a strategy that we launched with Denmark's tech diplomacy back in February of this year. I think the most interesting point actually about this strategy is that for the first time we put out quite openly a very open, transparent strategy outlining 21 KPIs. And so I come from the World Economic Forum before in the private sector. So going into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and working with key performance indicators, it took a bit of time because how do you measure diplomacy? How do you show diplomatic results in 3 years? When I said before, diplomacy is something about long-standing relationship. It's about Denmark being out in the world for 250 years, cultivating relationships in a way that we haven't done before. Well, this time we're actually trying to still insist that we have to show results about this. We have to be able to put up publicly how we're trying to deal with this, because technology is so dramatically changing. It is a fast-paced, changing world. And if we are to keep up, if we are to show what governments are doing to tackle both the challenges and reap the opportunities, and if we are to work in, I think, trusted, committed relationships with the industry, we need to work also a little bit like them at times. The strategy I just want to quickly touch on, we have 3 pillars, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the dilemmas across some of these. The first one is around democracy. Here it's really focusing on championing global digital rules and regulations that build on democratic values and human rights. And I think even just in that sentence, you might see some other dilemmas because there is not necessarily a global agreement about what does that mean. There is not a global standard on neither democratic values nor how we interpret and protect human rights. So we really take a point of departure in European digital leadership based on these democratic values, but also a transatlantic one, and one that finally is connecting the democracies around the world, from the Pacific, from Southeast Asia, across the African continent, to Latin America, because this cannot be a sole endeavor of a few countries in the North. And then secondly, it's around human rights online. For too long, we've seen how we neglected human rights online when we've been strong defenders of them offline out in the real world. And that has to, I think, take a quite dramatic change where we are right now. Secondly, it's around security. As I was saying before, we're seeing an increasingly complex, ever-changing threat landscape, from state-sponsored disinformation campaigns to state-sponsored IP theft, to attacks in our critical infrastructure. It's only, I think it's less than a month ago that the National Health Service of Ireland was attacked. We've seen how the big cyber attacks, WannaCry and NotPetya, a few years ago, that didn't only harm Danish industries, but also Danish utilities and Danish infrastructure. So we got to make sure that technology supports Denmark's safety and Denmark's security. We need to ensure that we have the right resilience in cybersecurity, that we can make the right deterrence against malicious actors, and that's both state and non-state actors. So that's increasing our security policy in cooperation with like-minded countries in the European Union, globally through the NATO alliance. It's a specific work on cyber and disinformation. As recent as yesterday, we had a talk with a group of like-minded countries, government experts, sitting on the disinformation agenda with Facebook's disinformation team. Because if government alone can't tackle this, companies like Facebook alone can't tackle this, but if we work together and with civil society, we might actually have a chance to stand up against these ever more sophisticated actors, not least in cyberspace. And then finally, children and youth. And this is not a traditional foreign policy or security policy focus area, but for Denmark, it is increasingly. We're seeing how children and youth are especially targeted online. We see that from the very question of how are they navigating social media platforms, at what age, how are we securing them, to the very question of illegal content, including children. And then the final pillar, and I just want to focus a little bit on, is this piece around responsibility. And I think a lot of what you've been discussing around fintech and the banking sector, this question of responsibility when it comes to technology is one that we really have to be focusing a lot more on. How to make sure that both tech giants, but also technology companies and the way we use technology, we do it in ways that we meet our societal responsibility. Those expectations from the public of using technology to benefit people, and how to make sure that we do it in a fair market. I think if we are to reap the benefits from fintech, from artificial intelligence, from all of these new technologies, it requires our businesses to operate, with fair business models, proper market conditions. And one of the ways that we do that is obviously through Danish digital solutions and showcasing what do we think that responsible digital development looks like. And I think here is another dilemma. So governments, governments in front of the tech development. But which governments? And this is one of the big questions that we are often faced with, because we talk about democratically elected governments setting the standards, leading on global governance, but we don't all see eye to eye. I think there was a huge milestone with the recent visit of President Biden in Europe a few days ago to discuss some shared values, not least around tech policy. But there's a lot of things that we even transatlantically don't agree on. Then take in, the world's 193 countries. How do we set the proper frameworks, the proper global governance regulations for an internet that right now is global? There is not an American internet and a Danish internet and a Chinese internet. At times it does bifurcate. We are seeing aspects of the splinternet, but there's still some things that we need to be tackling together. So this is a big dilemma of who is the right, who are the right governments to take those decisions. And just quickly wrapping up here, we've been seeing how private sector is increasingly scrutinized for what are you doing, take the right decisions, how are you operating in this? It is, if we can't even among democratically elected governments agree on some of these standards, how are we expecting a single individual to take decisions that are impacting billions of people? And so while we're seeing, an increase in political attention, we also need to say this shouldn't be up to tech companies alone. This should really be something that we have the maturity to take the decision on. Some of the ways that we're doing this is actually engaging a group of like-minded countries. So this is from 2019, back when we could still physically meet. We gathered a group of 25 tech and cyber diplomats here in Silicon Valley for conversations both with each other to talk about how we're tackling technology policy changes, how we're navigating this, what are we doing around foreign policy, and secondly, to have closed and engaged conversation with the industry. Here at Brad Smith from Microsoft. We visited cyber companies, Google, lots of others in this pursuit of saying we need to find closer collaboration. So let me just stop here and say this is a little bit about how we're sort of seeing the world playing out right now, what we're navigating as a tech ambassador, but I think more importantly as tech diplomats in a quite fast changing world. And now I'd love to hear questions, comments, thoughts, how you're tackling some of this.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for that inspiring talk. We have heaps of questions, and so please don't hold back. Just use the chat and check in with the questions or comments across. You've been in office now more than a year and a half, and you have also background with World Economic Forum and previously on this very, very global issue, and so we are just about 27 countries represented from all regions in the world, and I think you mentioned it also in your talk. How do you see that global sort of discourse and global discussion developing? Is this becoming a global topic, and are we seeing this also being dealt with in that kind of global context that you talk into?
Absolutely. I've actually only been in the chair for 8 months, but at times it feels like multiple years, I'm telling you. So I came from the World Economic Forum before, and I remember we had the first topic on the fourth industrial revolution at Davos in 2016. And it was such an exciting meeting. I remember the talks were about flying cars, artificial intelligence would solve all of our health problems, education would be purely online. And then I think there was this fringe session that no one attended that was talk a little bit more some of the ethical dilemmas. Fast forward to my last Davos just before the pandemic, the main concern was around geopolitical tensions and technology. What are we doing with an AI race between China and US and making sure it's not only used in terms of military use, but for proper purpose? How are we going to do AI regulation globally? How do we make sure that we stay human-centered? What are some of the sustainability costs of blockchain? So I think the pendulum has simply swung from this like exciting, optimistic, I'm going to be able to control my phone with my thoughts. Fast forward 5 years until today, we're much more concerned. We're seeing much more citizens. We actually did a survey just among Danish citizens before launching the strategy. People are quite concerned. What is the impact on my child's long-term ability to socialize by being online? What are the long-term effects to our democracies? Is this undermining the very way that we're talking? And I think even if you don't live in the US, what happened on the Capitol on January 6th, I think was a stark reminder that even what we think are the most stable democracies around the world can be challenged, not least from also when things offline trickle onto the internet online. So I think that the pendulum has swung. We're in a much more critical place, and we are to not go kind of down a very dark, I think, alley and not allowing us to reap the amazing benefits that I still do think technology certainly holds. Let's put those guardrails. Let's make sure that democratic governments, individual citizens, parliaments, tech companies take the right decisions, because it's not too late. I think I don't see all gloom and doom. I think we actually still got a fair chance of making this sure it functions the right way. So when we go on and live our lives 10, 15, 20 years from now, it will be living more freer, better, more sustainable, more meaningful lives with technology. And then we got to empower individuals. I think this feeling that you can't control, that you don't know how to use, you barely understand the terms of, the terms of service agreements that we get on our phones. We got to change that to make people feel more empowered in taking their own decisions. And I think also when some of the dilemmas you are working with when it comes to responsible innovation, making users, citizens, consumers much more empowered in how to, shape technology in a way and innovation in a way that it supports them without understanding necessarily, how does an algorithm work? How do I write code? I think it's a kind of a key parameter for us.
And can we actually reclaim? I mean, I don't know if we've lost control, but I mean, you talk about a very, very rapid development in technology that's impacting democracy and societies across, which is happening tremendously fast and with a very strong sort of impact. We know, or traditionally, diplomacy churns more slowly. And so the development of international agreements and talks and so forth, and even sort of the way society reacts for democracy to make a decision on impact takes time. I mean, can we reclaim control, and is it possible, or have we actually sort of lost part of that sort of society control on key societal aspects to technology?
Look, I wouldn't be able to hold this position if I didn't have some optimism, I think, still in also the international system. Honestly, there's a lot of work to be done. We are still trying to govern 21st century technologies with the institutions that we set up in the 20th century and with the mindsets and ideologies of the 19th century. We probably got to change that. But I think, lots of quite interesting things are happening, and we're seeing a huge pressure from actually younger people. And I still sort of count myself among those. I think coming in and say, let's do things a little bit differently. Let's work much more with agility. Let's try to find new partnerships. That's while we are continuously engaged in what sometimes feels like very, very long UN processes, trying to agree on some of the norms in cyberspace. How do we, on this kind of a short-term, work with like-minded governments, tech companies, civil society organizations to deal with some of those challenges? How do we ensure that we still have diplomatic missions even to countries where we don't always see eye to eye in some tech policies? I think China being one example. How do we ensure that we get a much more I think, an inclusive conversation around this. And that's where social media has been, an amazing upside, that we actually get people much more engaged. There's a lot more we can do. I think democracy needs a bit of a kind of at times a bit of an overhaul too. But I also see, from young candidates going into politics to grassroots organizations to even people developing new technologies, we're quite insisting on trying to do that. Empowerment, inclusivity, diversity. I see everything, Black Lives Matter became sort of a global movement around inclusivity, diversity, about being heard, about getting different voice. And I think when we see that trickling into, political systems and how we're designing and developing technology, I remain optimistic, but I guess we can all check in 5 years from now and see whether I was too naive or it made sense.
And how do you see other sectors? I mean, your main focus is probably sort of the big tech companies, and you mentioned the big five, and the number of technology companies that are providing all these sort of technologies that are impacting. We're working with the financial sector, all those sectors that are actually using technology and that are also more and more developing technologies. How do you relate to those, and how do you see those sort of other industry sectors as interlocutors in this discussion, and where do you see them positioning themselves, also in relation to sort of the responsibility that they also have in using these technologies? I mean, they are the ones that use the technologies more and more that impact citizens' lives in getting access to capital, getting a loan, getting insurance, and so forth.
I think kind of several points on that. One is, yes, we focus a lot on the big five or the big 10, or kind of regardless of how we choose to see it, but we also focus a lot on that huge middle ground of both technology developers, startups, and traditional companies using technology. I think when we look at the financial sector, there's several things that are quite interesting. One is, large companies are increasingly going in on their turf too. I mean, Facebook's Libra was an example of that. You've probably been discussing that quite a lot. Cryptocurrencies, could potentially destabilize a lot of how we've been dealing, I think, organizing our financial markets for quite some time. The Robinhood app. I mean, we're starting to see quite dramatic changes in how traditional markets that financial markets are one of the most heavily regulated markets, because it comes down to individual consumers' money and often, experience in life going forward. So I think it's one of those areas where we need to be much better at doing proper regulation that is not only looking at when the traditional old guard are using technologies, but that whole of society approach. What does that mean for new entrants coming in? What does that mean for startups that also want to push the envelope? I mean, from a Danish perspective, we've been seeing quite a lot of interesting fintech startups that are really pushing, pension companies, insurance companies, and big banks, and to do much more responsible investments, much more sustainability investments. They're doing, I think, much more quite provocative naming and shaming of also kind of big traditional capital companies. So I think, one, getting regulation that really serves that full market and is focusing on how do we protect consumers and citizens and customers, regardless of which of these they're integrating with. Two, one of the things that I often talk to in my former role at the World Economic Forum, I actually spoke quite a lot, not least to various kind of actors in the financial markets and how to think about technologies. And I think the most important is, don't place it with the CTO. Tech is not something that the nerds down in IT, they can figure out. It has to be a values discussion, a fundamental values discussion of, if we are integrating artificial intelligence into our systems, what's the purpose? If we are increasingly using digitized services, why are we doing that? How do we ensure that it becomes better for customer privacy, customer protection, customer opportunities, customer experiences? And that's the values conversations that the executives should have, that every new person joining a team in a financial institution should have. And it shouldn't just be reserved to the IT guys, but something I think we need to take a much more holistic approach to. So a values conversation, and that's where we're also kind of our point of departure in discussing this with, whether it's financial services, some of the big kind of traditional industries in manufacturing, hard to abate sectors.
Thank you. So you talked about the sort of the global nature of this discussion, the sort of the global political and scene, and some of the differences that we have in approach to this across countries. So Paul raises in the chat the question about how we reconcile the cultural differences in a global tech environment with regard to tech control. I mean, as this becomes more and more a global discussion, how do we reconcile different approaches? I don't know if you want to add to the question, Paul.
I'm sorry, I was
Well,
unmuted. So,
Oh, great.
so
Hi, Paul.
hi, how are you? Yeah, so what I wanted to really address there was when we have global differences in how we look at technology and what the controls are, and different parts of the world have different cultures and opinions around that. My concern is, are we going to run into a point where we are stuck, where we can't move forward because we can't get enough consensus from in any direction? Is there a middle ground we can shoot for?
Thank you so much, Paul. That's an excellent question, and I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have to, solve when it comes to dealing with this globally. We've been sitting in some of the UN's many working group on cyber norms. Actually, quite basic principles on when do we see something as infringing, security and peace in the cyber realm, and we have such a hard time agreeing, on the details of that text. And take that to an even larger, what is harmful content in one country is not in another. I think one of the classic examples I use is that, to see a nipple on a social media platform in Denmark is not a big deal. It's quite a big deal where I live right now. Whereas if you see an advertisement for guns in the US, it's not a big deal. Whereas in Denmark, it would be a big deal. And then take that into much more, I think much more important questions of 5G, critical infrastructure. Where does your semiconductors and microchips come from? The landscape gets quite complex. The way that I see it and how we can make sure we don't end up in a gridlock is on a global governance. We need to set some very basic rules. And then we need, in a regional context, I think both North America, I think we're seeing it in Europe, I think we're seeing it some among the like-minded countries in this. How do we then find, I think, a bit more agreement on some of the things that we do find a closer collaboration on? And then it's also up to national governments to find, what are some of the quite national protections? There might be some religious, cultural reasons for seeing specific tech policy. And then the challenge becomes, how do you make that interoperable between those high-level global rules and regulations, regional differences, and down to the very national domestic? And that is the big challenge, figuring out how to make that interoperable, how to make sure that we can still do cross-border data flows, that we can still work seamlessly globally around the world. And so one thing, the optimism about getting global governance on this a few years ago was much more prominent. Now, what we're starting to see, not least when it comes to the geopolitical rivalry I talked about earlier, some of the export controls, import controls, questions around supply chain for where does your kind of physical chips, physical pieces of your machinery, physical pieces of technologies are coming from, is becoming much more high on the agenda. The questions around 5G, and we're going to see much more of that coming. So we got to find a way to do interoperable, still agreeing. Globalization have brought us much good. How do we continue to kind of protect global open markets while making sure that there's also sovereignty and that there's protection in individual markets?
Thank you. So you've talked about some of the threat to democracy, how technology enables or in itself poses risks to our democracies and how those function. Just before you joined, we were talking about sort of another big issue, how relating to the financial sector, how insurers in parts of the world will be impacted by climate change, how that relates also to technology, and how climate change might impact the ability to loan, or the possibility to loan and have credit. I mean, there's a host of really main challenges facing us relating to technology and elsewhere where technology also may play a role. What is the biggest threat? What is your main sort of focus? What is your main concern when we look at these challenges or dilemmas across? What are you really worried about?
I mean, there's quite a number of things that keep me up at night. I think actually taking point of departure in the industry that you're particularly working with, if we don't get this values piece right, we're going to end up with worse editions of the systems that we have today. I think when we're looking at insurance companies, this idea that if I get an entirely, Internet of Things throughout my entire home, and my insurer can see how often I take a beer out of the fridge and how often my smart dishwasher is reporting into the insurance company that she's been drinking red wine again. And the fact that, the whatever smart equipment I have in my gym hasn't been used, and all of a sudden my credit score falls, my insurance premium goes up, I won't be able to get into a hospital. Like, this is sort of a worst case Black Mirror potential scenario, where the technology becomes a daily surveillance, and one that is not allowing us to see ourselves as full human beings who are not flawless. We are full of flaws and mistakes and errors. And I think that a lot of the ways that we've been setting up, I think our insurance industry, banking industry, to some degree still allows us to see, full humans that change over time, that evolved. I'm not the same person I was when I was 15. I'll be a different person when I'm 50. And if we forget that human aspect in a world where everything is digitized, where every single, footprint and fingerprint I have in this world is recorded and stored and saved forever and will impact me for the rest of my life, I think that is a very kind of wrong path to go down on. How many, looking back at what you voted in elections, if you've been voting for 30 years, did that change over time? Probably. If some of you are parents, your priorities changed probably quite dramatically. If some of you are parents with children that moved away from home, your priorities probably changed again. So we change as human beings, we evolve over time. And I think the worst possible case is that we get systems where we don't allow for that. I think very human component. So looking at how we are applying, whether it's artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, this amazing digitization that can make things a lot more easy on us. I think some of the questions around facial recognition begs the same questions. How do we allow us to continuously be human in a human world? Because this is not a 100% digitized world yet. It is a human world. How to make sure that the inequality aspects, right now what we're seeing is whether we're talking facial recognition, it often is the biggest negative is to people of color. We've been seeing how I think a lot of the kind of fintech opportunities that was really heralded as the big solution to a lot of the challenges on inequality and economic opportunity in the global South. Well, in those countries, I remember a study coming out from the African continent and East Africa. Too many of the mobile subscriptions was done on household, and in the household there was a man who was sort of on the ownership of that. So all data was derived ultimately from men, made it very difficult for women to obtain a loan, to get a credit score, because there wasn't any data of it. There wasn't any sort of meaningful track record in this digitized world. So thinking not just about this, I think in a sort of a very narrow sense, but in a global sense, how do we make sure that this is not, exacerbating the digital divide? How is this not exacerbating inequality? How to make sure that it fundamentally delivers? I think on just one last point on the sustainability agenda, I've been talking at Davos for 5 years straight about how artificial intelligence, satellite imagery, new forms of computing would radically, revolutionize the way we do agriculture efficiency, with the way we do forest management, the way we, stop deforestation, stop, all of these issues. We're not there. We're not even on track on meeting the Paris Climate Agreement. So I think a huge point for us is to much more actively go and say, how do we as individuals, as people who are going to be working closely with some of these sectors, insist on making sure that these technologies ultimately purposeful and implemented in a way so they deliver on some of those, I think, larger objectives.
Thank you. So Elise has a relevant question I mean, we are providing, as part of our project, or output of our project, we are providing basic research on this and exploring, analyzing some of these challenges. So if I may phrase your question, so what information do governments such as Denmark use in designing tech policy? How does the sort of academic-oriented research and the type of information that we are uncovering as part of our project inform your work? I mean, how do you relate to that plethora of sources, and how do you relate to academic research in this, which is relevant as we're providing input?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elise. So we are doing much more to integrate, I think, information, understanding perspectives from a much broader sector. And I don't think we've been good enough at that. And I don't think really many governments have been good enough in that, but I think it's going out and kind of sourcing much more information from centers of excellence. That's actually one of the big reasons also, us being over here, working with Stanford embassies. We have more than 50 embassies across the world working with universities to try and source what are some of the recent, I think, publications, understanding research and all of this. That's also why we're working with tech companies. We're not asking tech companies, how should we, make new policy and regulation on you, but we are asking and understanding their perspectives, their challenges, the dilemmas that are facing, and then we take that into consideration. We do a lot more public hearing. But I think one thing we could get a lot better at, these ideas of kind of about agile governance, about how do we set up policy labs, how do we take a much more experimental approach, design thinking approach to policy. Bureaucracy changes very, very, very slowly. There's still a lot of work to be done. So I think any way for any of you engaging with your national governments, on whether it's tech policy labs, whether it's some kind of iterative design, any sort of agile practices, we still have a lot to learn. And I think that's one of bureaucracy's greatest challenges right now is how to adapt and make sure that we get much more timely decision in. And also, I think realizing we're not going to take perfect decisions. That's why we got to change them over time. That's why we need that closer collaboration, not least with also research centers, to make sure that those, constantly updated information, learning from how others are doing this is sort of a constant source of inspiration.
That's unless you have follow-up, Elise. I mean, it's sweet music to our ears, because that's exactly what we are really looking at, sort of uncovering some of those dilemmas, but also how to use design thinking, how to use sort of those approaches in ideating around both the dilemmas and the outcome and how to relate to them, and we'll.
Well,
sorry.
maybe just I need to run off soon to kind of speaking of bureaucracy, another meeting. But maybe just I think kind of a strong encouragement from my side is I would been very kind of pleasantly surprised and very interested in some of the work that Søren has been sending me that you guys have been doing. We'd love to kind of continue to see that. I think from a Danish government perspective, but also the way that we're engaging with this at a European level, very inspired, very interested to see your work. And then just, I think, an encouragement from my side, while in academia, get out there and also put yourself into the policy debates. This cannot be up to just policymakers and bureaucrats sitting in the same systems for a long time. This really has to be, I think, inspired and influenced by people like you. So just to say, appreciating your amazing work, and thank you so much for not least sharing with governments such as ours. We're really quite thrilled to be seeing some of the important work being done. I think especially in such a nascent green field such as tech policy, and not least when it comes to the financial sector, learning and ideation and going to this with kind of an open mind and through experimentation is the best way forward. So thank you so much, and thank you for the great questions.
Thank you. It was really, really interesting to learn about your work, and we'll be very happy to share our work and really happy if it's useful for your dialogues and work going forward. So we'll definitely keep you informed. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your interesting work and the perspectives for that going forward. We are really excited about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day or evening or afternoon, regardless of where you are. Bye.
Bye. Thanks. Great. So, thank you all again. I think we got a bit more input on the overall context, how this relates to sort of regulation and society. Sorry, we missed your questions, Akachi, there. We can follow up on that, and we'll pick up on many of these topics. We are looking also, as we've discussed previously, at both the different cultural aspects, and we'll follow up on that. We talked about it just now, and we'll obviously follow up on that as well. And we'll look at how different regions or countries are relating to this through regulation, and what approaches we see across the globe. Providing a wider frame to our work. Are there any comments or reflections after having talked to Anne-Marie? We can take them now. Any sort of new ideas for dilemmas or approaches we should look at in our work?
Actually, I don't know if it is possible to do that, but she was talking about policymakers and how we should get in contact with them. And I thought here that maybe we could bring someone from the European Parliament to talk about GDPR or something like that. I don't know if it is possible, but just idea.
That's definitely not impossible. And that's really a very good idea. We are looking at and hopefully also creating some sort of wider debates over the coming week. So that's actually a very good idea. I'll be happy to try and follow up on that. Then we should perhaps not just talk to the sort of European Parliament, but we should try and reach out more widely. But that's a very good idea. Eskil? Yeah.
Yeah. I should be there now. Sorry.
You are.
I think you just kind of said what I wanted to say. That actually I would be more interested in hearing about like other countries that don't have GDPR or areas where they don't have a specific law and the reasons why or stuff like that. So yeah.
It's developing, and this is a super relevant discussion. We'll exactly try to map that, and you should be part of that, because obviously there are different approaches to this, also based on different traditions for regulating or how to regulate. Most obviously, we've seen the differences in approach between the US and Europe and so forth. But we'll follow up on that. Annelise?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me correctly?
Yeah.
I was just wanted to make a comment about the question about seeing someone from the GDPR for the European Commission and so on. But what would also be very interesting is that they created a new bill concerning the GDPR about artificial intelligence, like a few months ago, I think 2 or 3 months ago. So it would be very interesting to have an access also to this part of the new bill, if we can. If we would have someone speaking about the GDPR, that they also access the artificial intelligence part.
Yeah.
That's very new.
Yeah. I actually have a meeting with the European Commission tomorrow to discuss exactly that. So I really very much agree, and we have we've informed the Commission about our work, and they find it interesting, and I hope we can make them exactly share thoughts like that. because that's of course really relevant. I shared the in the mail I sent out the day before yesterday, Mariette Schake's overview of that new legislation. There's a lot of information about that on the European Union web pages, on the new or that entire sort of compendium of work that has been done in that area. So we'll definitely follow up, and we'll also do it globally on different approaches, because I mean there are really many ways of or approaches to regulating and dealing with this, obviously. But really good and important questions. More comments or ideas? Felix?
Yeah, what I thought is interesting, I mean, we had, not here, but we had a lecture with someone who worked in, he was kind of a hacker, and he kind of elaborated how difficult it is for governments or governmental institutions to basically keep up with the technology, because always the open market pays more salary. People rather would go to Facebook than to US or European governments. So if we use stuff like AI or whatever as a tool to supervise and as a tool to impose regulations, how can we overcome this tech problem? And maybe there we could hear someone who works in tech roles within governmental institutions, whether it's in Europe or in the US. I think that's quite interesting.
There's an enormous, this is really important, there's an enormous challenge in bridging knowledge and about this area and to those areas that actually make decisions, both in terms of sort of translating what is it that technology does, and then in actually understanding how to regulate. I mean, that requires that you have some understanding of that, and then adapting the pace of with which we regulate to the pace with which technology develops and the possibilities of, I mean, that's going to be an extreme challenge for societies going forward forevermore, and more, because obviously pace of technology is picking up. So our societies are really challenged by this, and we need. If you, I don't know if you notice, if you follow the congressional hearings here. And you saw sort of the difference between those two large hearings in Washington or in the US on that reaction. There was one about 2 years ago where the members of Congress were probably not really prepared for sort of the level of technology that they were discussing, and then the discussion that they had last year, where it actually wasn't the members of Congress but the tech CEOs who were really sweating because they were being pushed. So there is a build-up of that kind of knowledge and competence within governments. I mean, Anne-Marie is an example of that, and the difference in those two discussions were relevant. So other comments? We left, and we'll follow up on these. We left the discussion. We heard from two teams just before. Anne-Marie, could we just follow up briefly on the remaining teams? So just
from the insurance team, Søren?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually we are, as I mentioned before, we are on progress. Still, we just have divided ourselves in small groups. So in this week we are working on small groups regarding claims management, pricing, and underwriting process. So that is pretty much it. We will have a meeting next Wednesday to discuss the progress that we made this week. So probably in the next inspiration session, we can fill with more information for the other groups.
Great. We look forward to that, and are excited about that. And again, tell us how we can support and help the process going forward. Any issues and questions that you see that you could need help with?
Yeah. So right now I'm just working with Sarah Tang. We are in a small group working on pricing, and we will have a meeting tomorrow to discuss a little bit about the dilemmas in pricing and try to find dilemmas together. Actually, I don't know about the other small teams that we have developed, but yeah, that is pretty much it. Yeah, that is it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Soren.
And so which team haven't we heard from? Payments or customer management? Yeah, Esken?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I keep forgetting that. It's so easy.
We all do.
All right, so just a brief update. We're having a meeting later today. And I guess we kind of left it, so I weren't there at the last inspiration meeting. Based from our last meeting in the customer engagement team, we're kind of at the same spot, I guess. So today we're meeting to discuss some more about the dilemmas we gathered, and we want to move towards building a customer engagement journey or customer journey, I think, and developing some personas. And also, as you mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we have tried to develop some more categorizations or keywords within each dilemma to be able to better categorize it later and to analyze it better. So I think that we're sort of moving on all of these things. It's still very broad right now, but I think we're starting to make it more condensed and more towards something in the end. So yeah, steady, slowly, but definitely towards something. So I think it's good.
Perfect, great. Thanks, Esken. And again, let us know how we, where there are resources it would be relevant for you to talk to, or how we can in any way support your work. It sounds exciting. And who didn't we hear from? I lost track. Which team? Ria?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I'm from the payments team.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same scene with us. We have a meeting tomorrow, so we'll have a better catch up tomorrow. But to give an update, last time we had an introduction to Miro for the whole team, and we could see roughly how it's being used. So individually, while we're working on our topics, I think we're working on actually collecting data. That's all the websites and the scholarly articles. And maybe tomorrow, once each person and each team member has their data together, we can start filling in Miro also. And then we can add it to the, I think the bigger picture that you all had, I think Spencer had shared in the starting. So we can compare how we have researched and how our research compares to other teams and how it will be relevant to them as well as us. So,
perfect.
And
sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's it. So I think the topics also discussed last time. So we are looking at our individual geographies mainly. That's Europe, South America, US, India, Singapore, and mainly Southeast Asia. And also in Africa, we have Kenya and Nigeria. And the main theme is definitely data protection, how governments are working towards it, and how aware the users themselves are. You know, of all the payment apps, whether they're of text or banks and stuff, are users aware of their rights? So yeah, that's a rough overview.
Perfect. Really great. So we look forward to hearing more about that and discussing that with. And again, let us know how we can help and support and that work. And again, all of you have a look across and what the other teams are doing. I think that's at this stage really relevant to stay informed about what the other teams are actually working on, and where that might impact or relate to the work that you're all doing. Sasha had a question, really good question about sort of the research papers and how that research side will be developed. I'd like to take that discussion and answer. Sasha had to leave, so maybe we should follow up on that discussion at our next session. But I mean, we are definitely so the question related to how we'll make sort of academic papers and what a process may be and where we could see that if we have topics that would be relevant. We are actively scanning for opportunities to share our work. We're looking at call for papers and conferences that are coming up. And we are really keen to support. I mean, we have a pretty broad network of people who can also help and mentor and support that kind of work. So we are really keen to hear your ideas through your work and your sort of interests for that, and we'll follow up on that. I don't know if Elise, you have any comments now, or if we should wait for to a session later to discuss this further.
Yeah, I think we can wait and we can have a broader conversation. But I think just to make the point to Sasha's question that absolutely this is what we're thinking about, and we hope you all are thinking about it as well, and bringing your particular interests and your disciplinary sort of practices, but also the associations that you care about, so that we can make sure that we include those in our list.
Great, thank you. So. I hope we provide, or Anne-Marie provided more food for thought, and that not least the discussion and the opportunity to talk across has also been useful for you all. Look at, and again, so look at what we store or what we share at the Google Drive. I saw a question about it. If anyone does not have access to Google Drive and the Miro boards and all that, please say so, and we'll help you and make sure that you have that access. It's important that you can access that and you can follow the work in the other teams. We are looking at the templates we have already in the Miro board, and we'll reach out for questions and follow up in relation to that. And we will, as said, we'll look more and more at reviewing and asking questions to expand and understand the dilemmas or the challenges that you've identified and that you are working on as we take this further. So please raise those issues, and then please expect end of this week, as mentioned, a request from us to pick a date, or pick both dates if they're both convenient for you, in the week following June 28, or the week beginning with June 28, for those two sort of ideation sessions that we'll do to promote thinking across. You mentioned, and Eskil had that question about other technologies. We'll provide input on and that was a good cue. We'll provide input on other technologies that are relevant. We'll look more at AI, but we'll also look a little bit more at crypto and face recognition, biometrics, other technologies that are relevant that'll come up. And we have quite a few really interesting speakers also for the coming sessions. Tencent, Ping An, Safari, Paystack, Lagos Business School are part of the people that we'll meet, and we are reaching out to a few more. Thank you for the very good idea about some of the parliamentarians. We'll try and make a setting for that. And we'll look at how, also in follow-up to what Anne-Marie discussed, how regulators and how countries are relating to some of these challenges in follow-up. So stay tuned. I don't know if there are at this stage any more questions. I know we have a few more sessions, or some of the teams have sessions today. So if there are no more questions from any of you now, I suggest we call it a day, and give you time to prepare or join those sessions that you have across. I hope this was useful. It was really good to see you all, and thanks for your dedication. We are really excited about where we are, and sort of the level of output that we are producing. So let's see where we can apply it, and where we can take it from this, and let's focus on developing and sharing even more between the teams the work that you're doing. So thank you for today, and I look very much forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Søren.
Thank you, Søren.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Akachi. We'll follow up on your good question. And as you saw, we reached out. Glory, thanks for also for the help in identifying speakers at the business school. So thank you all. We'll close